Hey everybody, KC here. So a couple of weeks ago on the Retail Tomorrow podcast, we had a terrific guest named Terry Hawkins. And Terry is this wonderful trainer, educator from Australia here in the United States. She has worked with a lot of different really, really big, really, really successful companies to help them figure out the best ways to train and continually educate employees. And one of the things that we touched on a little bit during the podcast, but then talked a lot more about after we signed off, was the whole notion of how companies should figure out how do you nurture, how do you motivate, how do you inspire employees who at this point, 6 months into the pandemic, are feeling beaten up. And listen, I've talked to a lot of retailers who have told me, they said, my employees, they're just dead. They're dead on their feet. And we got to figure out ways to alleviate that, especially because we're coming into the holiday season. And in talking to Terry during and after the podcast, I said, I'd love to have her do a morning newsbeat interview. We can talk a little bit more about this subject and talk about what retailers need to do to nurture, inspire, and motivate employees at what is a really, really tough time. And so now, here's my conversation with Terry Hawkins. Hey, Terry, welcome to Morning Newsbeat.
Hello, Kevin. It's wonderful to be here.
So, one of the things we've talked about is the notion that, I've talked to so many retailers who have said to me that their employees are just beaten up. They're totally beaten up. And now they're looking at the holidays coming up pretty soon, and they're just worried about their well-being. And this is something that you know a lot about with your work with various retailers. So the first question I kind of wanted to ask you is, do you think they're beaten up? Is it emotionally? Is it physically? Um, is it unprecedented? I mean, what's your sense of it from having talked to retailers?
Well, I think you just nailed it if you look at the two areas, emotionally and physically. And obviously certain retail jobs, are not as hard on the body. But I think standing on concrete floors all day, I know as a trainer, if I'm standing on a concrete floor just for a few days, it plays havoc on my body. So we've got them standing on concrete floors. We've got them lifting boxes, moving stock. Now we have curbside. So they're having to do that, right, depending on where they live. So I think physically, absolutely, and maybe I think that's always been the case. It's just maybe now we're hopefully being a little bit more compassionate about it. And then emotionally, yes, I think that with COVID and the whole deal, they're having to deal with people's emotions. People bring their temperaments into play here, customers, managers, everybody alike, and they have to deal with that. So, yeah, I think it's been really, really tough on them always, but just now it's really heightened.
And I think it's interesting. I think that it has actually caught some retailers off guard because they probably figured as we went 4, maybe 5 months into the pandemic, things would start to normalize a little bit, and people would kind of find some kind of emotional equilibrium. But what happened was people were going back to people's kids were going back to school. They were dealing with that. Maybe two income families. What are we going to do about the kids? So it ratcheted up, I think, their emotional anxiety in a lot of different ways. And I'm not sure the culture has created the support systems necessary to deal with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that because really at the end of the day, they're our golden goose. And I think we forget that the front line is that. I think we've given it a lot. And I'm not saying anybody listening, I think when I say stuff, sometimes we can get a bit of a reaction on it. But one of the things I do say, if it stings, let it stick. If there's a bit of a reaction on something, then rather than go to deflection or justification or we do this and we do that, whoever's listening, you might be this amazing leader and have an incredible team. But you are right, Kevin. I think the fuel tank is empty and it's amazing. Like I've been a single working mother and you keep doing it. You have to do it. You have to do what's in front of you. But a lot of us do it on an empty tank. And I think if people can find the ways to fill the tank while we still have to go home and homeschool and juggle work and literally, into work, in the car, back home, get the groceries, come in, cook dinner, fall into bed, 5 hours sleep. If we can find some strategies too, because I think this is now the era of leading to serve. Command and control still is in existence. You're still here. People go, oh, I'm not that sort of a manager, but I think a lot of us are. And I think that we need to learn, how can I serve these frontline in a much more strategic, empathic and inspiring way, rather than motivating, inspiring them.
So for the moment, let's take money off the table as a motivator. I think everybody would agree. Yeah, money motivates.
Food's good. Yeah, we like to eat.
Yeah. Being able to pay for rent, pay for clothing, food, all positive stuff.
Exactly.
But what are other ways that, and I should point out, by the way, go back to something you just said, it's not just, for lack of a better term, big soulless retailers who have told me this. There's some small companies too that have said, who generally are pretty good about their about their employees, who take care of their employees, and they're also bemoaning the fact that their people are beaten up and trying to figure out how to deal with it. So that said, what are other ways that, in your mind, to sort of, I'm not sure motivate's even the right word, to nurture those employees so that we can get them over this emotional and physical hump?
That is I said inspire. I think you picked the word, the best word, nurture. And that's why, I keep glancing over here because I made a couple of notes, because there's so much to say in such a short space of time. I think, philosophically, we can, all talk about what we can do to help our teams. But I think there is a strategic methodology that we can use. And so I think giving them the tools and the skills to be able to be, so there's two parts. There's self-awareness, and then there's there's the individual needs that I have, and then there's my tribal or my community needs. And my community is my team. But it is innate in us to actually serve self first. We have to do that first. So I think giving people the individual skills, giving them courses on, and not just boring, there has to be inspiring, and not just this, go and do this course, but how do I deal with conflict? That should have been the first thing out the gate. Now, when you look at that, we can go, okay, well, we've got a 5-step procedure for customer complaints. It's like, good for you, because the brain needs to pattern. Yeah, so it's going to look for a system. Then we teach them about empathy and caring about the customer, and, what does it feel like? But then you also have to go, and who are you inside of that? So what are the chemical reactions that you have on that? A customer comes at you, now we're wearing masks, now, there's all this fear base around it. So if you give someone the tools in those 3 areas, the system, the empathy, the emotional empathy, and then the awareness of my chemical reaction on it. Notice I'm not saying anxiety, whatever, fear. The chemical reaction that I can manage, I can take that one tiny toolkit home. I can use it with my kids. I can use it when I'm a customer. And so we've now nurtured the human being to be a better human being that just happens to actually benefit our workplace as well. Can I share another one?
Sure.
So this little guy, so Flipman, and this is what I've become, renowned for. I get flown all over the world to speak about Pitman, who lives in the pit of misery, and Flipman. And if we get a chance, we might be able to tack the video of this. It's a 3-minute video, a cute little 3D animation on living in the pit of misery. And we have our pit pals with our pit posture, our pit prattle, and all this. It's all the P words. Yeah, we have a pit dog, a pit bull. Thanks very much. And so we identify the pit behaviours that we have that we take to work. And then Flipman is the 5-step process. So again, the brain needs a process. See, say, feel, do, be. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic, take action, integrate. You give that to people and they have a 5-step procedure for how to get out of that pit. That's a resource they can use at home, personally, at work. So, they're just a couple of the things that I go, they're the things that you can give people that can take with them for the rest of their life. And they will anchor that neurologically to your company. You give people tools that enhance their life. They remember you. They go, oh, I associate that enhancement with that experience, which happens to be my company.
It's interesting. You used the phrase before. Our employees are the golden goose.
Yeah.
And it occurs to me, there's two things you can do with a goose, right? Right? You can kill it,
Yes.
right? Roast it and eat it, or you can allow it to continue to give you eggs.
Can I give you a third option?
Yeah, well, okay, what?
Or you can squeeze it by the neck,
Right.
and go lay, and it will force the eggs out because that's all it can do. I know, but that's actually what we do. We go,
right.
I'll give you a really hard experience, environment, whatever, but I still expect you to give me the eggs.
So we need to think of our employees then as free-range geese, is what we need to think of, right?
I love that.
I
love that.
But I think that it's interesting because I think part of the problem is, and it's been exacerbated probably in a lot of ways by the pandemic, is that employees have not, in a lot of companies traditionally have not felt invested in the business. And I don't mean financially invested, although clearly that has a role in it as well. But it is making them feel invested in the business, making them feel like they are that being on the front line is the most important thing to do. For a lot of retailers, has not necessarily been their top priority. They may say it's their top priority, but it rarely actually is the top priority. And this has just sort of exacerbated it.
Oh, absolutely. My mum used to say words are cheap, and it's actually in the actions that we get to see, where people are committed to that. So I totally agree. And I think that, like I said before, this is the era of serving our frontline and doing what we can to actually help them be better.
Do you think it's easier and it's become a cliche, the whole notion of being a business with purpose, right? That's become sort of it's a cliche, but I think it's a valuable one in the sense that there are some businesses that identify a purpose beyond just selling stuff. Is it easier to help to nurture employees and help them feel connected to what's going on and maybe alleviating their exhaustion a little bit if you are sort of self-identified as a business with purpose?
I think the days, and just I'm going to come back to that to answer the other question probably better. I think the days are gone where, someone comes and is a loyal stalwart to a company for 30 years, like I'm going to be loyal to the brand. I think those days are gone because people are now, it's about, self and what am I going to get out of this? So when we look at this whole, can you just repeat what you said just at the end there? I'm going to pause.
Okay.
And I'll explain something to you. I now went into a little bit of panic. This is what I want us to show, to demonstrate what it looks like to have vulnerable leadership, vulnerable experience. There it is. It's come back in. People want to know that they're contributing to something bigger than themselves, but they also want to make sure that they're cared about. So they want to have significance and contribution. And I started to panic because I went, oh my God, I've forgotten what you said at the end because I've got a bit of nerves going on here.
I'll ask the question again. I can cut it.
No. I want to keep this in.
Oh, okay.
Because what I want to show people is that we have to have this allowance of vulnerability. As leaders, it's like, it's not cut and dry. It's not, here's your job, do this, say that. It is, human beings are human beings. And when we start to play, like as a store manager, take your team out one at a time for 10 minutes and go, this is 10 minutes all about you. Like how many, I know that 75% of this audience is probably more around supermarkets. Would that be right?
Yeah, about right.
Okay, so how many people would be in a supermarket? How many employees in an average supermarket?
I mean, it depends. It could be 100. I mean, if a bigger store could be 200 or 300. I mean,
wow.
But a lot of those part-time. It generally tends to be a 40% full-time, maybe, and 60% part-time.
So I do this circle where I have the customer in the middle, and then the CEO or the person who runs the business, because that's who they are. They're the CEO of their own store, and then all the layers in between. And if the CEO or the leader of the business and the frontline person are connected and aligned, then the rest in the middle falls into place. So understanding what it's like for that part-timer who comes in for, 10 hours a week, how do they really feel? Having the chance to actually have that one-on-one. when people feel good and they feel special, like when that goose feels loved, doesn't that, it's like having A-grade petrol, I don't know, what do you say here, gas, A-grade gas and the cheap stuff. You chug along, you know, you can be, you're bitter, there's a bit of resentment there, but when you feel cared about, you're right when it comes to money. If all the rest isn't being done, then I will focus on how little I'm getting.
Right.
But if I feel valued, and you've given me tools and skills, and education literally sets the neurons off in the brain. When I learn something new as a human, I literally get this hit, like this buzz. And if I, like I said, if I can have that in my workplace, then it's a bigger person. We get to change people's lives every day in supermarkets.
And it seems to me one of the things that supermarkets can do when it comes to educating their people and getting them to feel invested is, there's a lot of people who work in supermarkets who don't know that much about food, but there are people who work in supermarkets who know a lot about food. So what if you task the people who know about beef or produce or fish to teach other people, hey, you don't probably know anything about what all the different pieces of a cow are that go into the meat department. I think people would kind of get off on that. I think that they would find that interesting.
I was actually at the supermarket 2 days ago, and I'm standing at the counter, and the two people behind the gate, now unfortunately they didn't actually transfer it to the customer, but they were doing exactly what you said. One of them said, oh my gosh, have you tried the blah, blah, blah? It was just amazing. And the other one goes, no, but I tried this. And I'm thinking, what are they talking about? Like, where is it? So you've got this transference of knowledge. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and it can totally work for employee to employee, and it's also important that it worked from employee to customer. I always like to tell the story. I was once at a Trader Joe's, and it was in the middle of the summer. I was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Well, a lot of Trader Joe's employees wear Hawaiian shirts. A woman comes up to me, I'm standing in the aisle, I'm shopping, and she comes up to me and points at the arborio rice and says, what's that? And so I said, oh, you use that to make risotto. She said, what's risotto? So I told her how to make risotto. I went around with her, got her all this stuff, put it in her basket, and here's how you make it. And she walked away thinking, boy, Trader Joe's has good customer service.
Heaven. And that's what, my Progress Retail company and what I've done for my whole life, that is the art and love of supermarket retailing. You're building the story. And when she's making that risotto, she's going to be thinking about you and Trader Joe's, and it all that comes full circle. So, I mean, I love that. I mean, I always get that too. I must have that look where they go, and the sad thing is I can usually tell them, like, aisle 3, top of the shelf. But I think
went back to Trader Joe's at some point and said, where's that nice elderly man, who took good care of me? But let me ask you this question. So if you're teaching, because you made a reference to the store manager as being the CEO of the store, mm-hmm. But it seems to me that with a lot of companies, one of the things that has to happen is that whoever is the actual CEO of the company, I don't care if you're a 3-store company or a 3,000 store company, you've got to figure out a way to communicate the importance of employee nurturing.
Totally.
Somehow. So how do you do that? When you talk to companies, how do you help them do that?
I love that because, is the nurturer qualified to do the nurturing?
Right.
And, I did an executive program, I have to say pre-COVID now, because I can't even remember whether it was this year, last year or whatever.
All right.
But I worked with 48 senior leaders. So they were CEOs, national managers and so forth. And 2/3, it was a 3-day program, 2/3 of the program was actually about themselves, about their 7-year cycles, about the different motivators within those 7-year cycles. It was about inferential, literal, the 4 temperaments. And we built this map, I call it the map of me. And we built this map, and then we were able to go, well, that's where you're at. And this is the perception that you have of your team. Now let's do the map of your team. So, basic skills, basic leadership skills, delegation, feedback, all of those sort of things. As much as they are the core muscles, I suppose, from a leadership point of view, I think self-awareness, and I always say at the senior level, it's not leadership training, it's family therapy. Because you have a really different dynamic at that level.
Do you think, I'm listening to this, and I'm gonna before we're done, I want to make sure you tell people how to reach out to you, because I think you could be a valuable resource for a lot of companies. But it occurs to me as I'm listening to you that there are probably people watching this right now who are saying, you got to be kidding me. We're just trying to keep the stores open. We're just trying to make sure the stuff on the shelves and make sure there's enough people in our stores to take care of the customers we got. You want me to nurture them? You want me to educate them? You want me to train them? I just want them to show up, and at this point, I'm going to pay them a little bit more to do so. So how do you answer that question?
That is such a great question. It's counterintuitive. I actually did a little video on my LinkedIn page. Anyway, whatever. But what it was, I had these conversations with myself. If you notice that, I'll just go out and start chatting. It's counterintuitive. But when we're in crisis, we actually have to do what is counterintuitive. So when I'm old enough to have been through ups and downs, like, you know, I've spent 3+ decades in this industry. And I've seen what happens when people hit a hard spot. So 2008, what do? We completely stopped educating. 10 years later, we're now with a dumbed down, and I say that, you know, very effectively, leadership level, because they've all grown up in 10 years or 12 years. I would say that find it from somewhere. Find the happiest person that's got some skill set, even if you can't externally pay for it. Find someone internally. Do some research. Who's got this? Like do an audit on your own team, and then have someone do things to make people feel good, even if it's a pump-up session or whatever it might be. I've got a really quick exercise that every store could do. I think you and I talked about last time, and it's a bit of a, you know, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say it's a, you know, sort of like a gushy sort of, it's not, it's a feel good, warm and fuzzy, cheap, free. I reckon that most of the people working in their stores would have no idea how amazing they are. Everyone's actually running on empty. So if they go out and buy a whole bunch of pink paper, cut it up into little squares, and get people a whole bunch of pens at the back, and they write a person's name on the front. Nancy, who's on Register 9 on Thursday nights or whatever. Hey, Nancy, I always love how you smile at everybody, and you've always got something nice to say. Hey, Fred, you're so committed. You know, making sure that those shelves are stocked and neat and tight, whatever. No signatures, all anonymous. We have a whole bunch of bags, 100 bags out the back, and people just go through for the next 6 weeks, and they just drop in these little...
And the bags have everybody's names on them.
Everybody's name is on the front. Now, if you don't know people, but how amazing that all of a sudden you go, I wonder who Sam is from the warehouse. So you go and seek out Sam. And then they tie them up, and on Christmas Eve, they give everyone their little bag, and they say, tomorrow, when you're all exhausted, I could cry right now, when you're all exhausted and you've given so much to make other people's Thanksgivings or Christmas or whatever you want to do it for special, I want you to open that bag and know that you are valued, you are precious, we care about you. We may not have been able to give you much this year, but just know this is a bag of love from everybody that works with you. I guarantee you'll be busting to come back to work.
Well, and listen, the thing is, a lot of people might say we can't afford to do that, but I'm not sure they can afford not to do that kind of stuff.
Can't afford to not do that. If that's the case, then you need to be out of your job. Honestly, I mean it. If people can't do something, that's called effort, interest, and curiosity. I mean,
so Terry,
the manager should write 300 of them.
He should. You're absolutely right.
He should write 300 of them. I can do it.
And by the way, if a manager can't say something nice about each of his employees or her employees, then he has to. That he or her has to ask a question, which is, why are they working for me?
Exactly. Yeah. And what am I not looking for? I just love talking to you. Anyway.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so if people want to reach out to you and find out more about what you do, how do they do that?
Okay, so first of all, Progress Retail is my retail platform. So that is just progressretail.com. My email address is terry@progressretail, or easier, just terry@terryhawkins.com. And so I've also got my terryhawkins.com website too.
Terrific. That's great. Listen, thank you so much. I hope 6 months from now, people are not as exhausted as they are now, but if they are, maybe we can come back and do this again.
I would love that. I so would love that. Thank you for making
Thanks
such
so much. Appreciate it. Take care.
Okay.